Although I've had many fond memories of patients and families that I have loved and cared for, I wouldn't be truthful if I didn't tell you. I've also had many doubts about oncology nursing during some of the very rough seasons of life that we all experience. I've been at the crossroads, and I have seen the two roads that the poet Robert Frost has so beautifully written about. This hasn't occurred just once, but many times through the years as I've experienced the highs and also the lows of this road less traveled of oncology nursing.
You're listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast, where ONS Voices talk cancer, a resource from the Oncology Nursing Society. Through conversations with subject matter experts, we examine the important issues in oncology nursing, from new treatments to patient-centered research to advancements in clinical practice. Join us as we hear from nurses in all facets of oncology care, from bench to bedside and everywhere in between. Welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. I'm Jaime Weimer, Oncology Clinical Specialist at ONS.
And I'm Ann Ireland, Oncology Clinical Specialist at ONS. On today's episode, we will hear 4 stories that oncology nurses shared during the Second Annual ONS Storytelling session held at the 48th ONS Congress in April 2023. This year, our theme was Renewal. Each story illustrates an example of renewal in the context of oncology nursing.
ONS member Sarah Lewis is a palliative care nurse navigator at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. Her story is titled Missed Call. Listen to her message of the hope that oncology nurses instill in their patients every day.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lewis. I've been an oncology nurse for 13 years, and I started my career on our inpatient bone marrow transplant unit, working night shift. And I can still remember how eager I was to come into work each day. I signed up for our unit-based nursing practice council shortly after starting. I volunteered to be charge and to be a preceptor as soon as I had enough experience under my belt. I sat for the AOCN exam as soon as I was eligible. I was hungry for knowledge and constantly pushing myself to grow my professional practice. I even thought it would be a great idea to go back to school to get my master's degree while working nights full time. But I did it all because it's easy to focus your time and energy on your passion, despite being sleep deprived throughout most of it. 6 years into my career, I applied for a nursing leadership position, an assistant nurse manager on my unit. Initially, the position was designed so I could continue to have patient care responsibilities, but also be a nursing leader present to our night shift staff. Within a year of starting that position, the responsibilities changed and I no longer had patient care interactions. So I dove deep into embracing quality improvement projects, creating education for our staff, and supporting our newly hired nurses through their orientation and thereafter. I enjoyed my position, but was certainly missing direct patient care. I attended Congress in 2019 and left feeling so motivated to be the best oncology nurse I could be, but I did start to wonder if I could achieve that goal within my current position. I thought about this a lot in early 2020 and started to make plans for what career move would make the most sense for me. And then March of 2020, COVID hit and all planning went out the window. I don't have to explain how hard, scary, and frustrating at times it was to work in a hospital during the pre-vaccine times of COVID. Working inpatient with bone marrow transplant patients during COVID was exceptionally hard. Working anywhere in the hospital was hard, but the duty to protect our vulnerable immunocompromised patients in a state of so much uncertainty and strife was really challenging. I started my career in bone marrow transplant and assumed that is where I would stay until I retired. Then an opportunity presented in spring of 2021 to join the outpatient palliative care team as a registered nurse, and after much careful consideration, I decided to take the leap. It seemed like it was a good time for a change. It seemed like a dream position, and I knew I could always go back to bone marrow transplant if it didn't work out. I was surprised when so early after I switched my positions, my decision was affirmed and my oncology nursing career reinvigorated. It was early in my orientation period, and I was working with one of my providers during a clinic day. When we entered the exam room to meet with a new patient, she was visibly upset and tearful. We took a moment to sit down and introduce ourselves, and then immediately asked her what was going on. She tearfully responded that she had driven 2 hours, crying the entire way into clinic, because she was so sure that this appointment meant the end of the line for her, and that there were no treatment options left. She knew what hospice was and associated her meeting with the palliative care team that day as a meeting with hospice. Through education and reassurance, we explained to her the role of our team on her cancer care team. We spoke of the scope of our team, highlighting our role as symptom management experts, with the ultimate goal of improving her quality of life while she was undergoing treatment. She visibly relaxed and was able to enter a space to hear what we were saying and consider the positive impact our team could have on her current day-to-day life. We were able to help this woman not only with her symptoms, but also to navigate the complexity of her cancer care and to be a space to discuss hopes and worries for both the present and the future. This visit sticks with me more than a year later and emphasizes to me the powerful impact oncology nurses can have on our patients. It also exemplified to me the often murky waters our patients travel and the important role oncology nurses play to smooth out that ride for them as much as possible. My current position involves calling all patients prior to their first appointment with the palliative care team to provide education on what our team does and to conduct an initial needs and symptom assessment. I can't help but think of what a difference a simple phone call could have made for that woman that day. That experience motivates me every day to call my patients and spend the time that they need to understand what palliative care is and how it could benefit them moving forward. I'm happy to say that since I've been practicing independently, there have been 0 patients arriving to their first appointment in tears. I learned early on in my oncology nursing career the power of education, but will always appreciate the real-life lesson my patient taught me that day. It not only reinforced my decision to step into this brand new role, but it also re-energized my practice and spirit to continue to perform this awesome work we oncology nurses have the privilege to do every day. Thank you.
ONS member Crystal Johnson is a patient engagement liaison at Genmab and lives in Ohio. An unimaginable bond, Crystal tells us how her unit helped turn grief into hope for one young family and the renewal felt throughout their community.
This moment is a continuation of a tradition my peers and I began while working together on the Medical Surgical Hematology Oncology Unit, also known as G70, at the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic 7 years ago. Being an oncology nurse, you inevitably become an extension of your patient's family. Often, we are with our patients throughout every step of their oncologic journey, through initial diagnosis, first chemo, symptom management, remission, relapse, progression, and ultimately their end-of-life transition. What started as an idea to ease some holiday stress and give back to the patients that give us so much has turned into an opportunity to assist a grieving husband and father, pay the kindness forward for years to come, and help heal along the way. Every year, the Cleveland Clinic's Taussig Cancer Center adopts families at Christmas. They place gift tags on their Christmas trees with gift ideas on them, and then the caregivers are free to take as many tags as they would like and return the gifts back under the tree. G70 set out to begin a similar tradition by identifying families with children that had recently lost a parent. The holidays can quickly become overwhelming while adjusting to a new normal after such a tremendous loss. In preparation, G70 would organize fundraisers throughout the year to raise money for the upcoming holiday season. Custom t-shirts and sweatshirts adorned with our unit nickname, Chemo-Sabis, became a bestseller. G70 also became host to many of a walking taco bar. We even partnered with local restaurants to host a nurses' night out and fundraiser that brought people together to play volleyball and donate baskets for a basket raffle, all while supporting a great cause. Each year, we were able to adopt 3 to 4 families and coordinate with each one of them to either return to G70, where we would host them with a cookie reception and deliver their presents, or hand deliver them personally. It was always such an emotional moment when the families would return to the unit where most had spent the most vulnerable days of their lives. They would often share with us how nervous they were to return to G70, but being greeted with such kindness and generosity almost immediately put them at ease. We would share stories about their loved ones, and they would give us a glimpse into their lives before the cancer took over. Tears would turn to laughter, and every encounter ended in a group hug that felt healing. 4 years ago, and much to the reluctance of him, we adopted a young father named Alex. He had recently lost his wife. They had 2 beautiful children, and he admittedly had no idea how to shop for Christmas presents, but did not feel deserving of our kindness. He's a local police officer and was certain another family needed our help more. After some encouragement from his mother and father-in-law, he graciously accepted. His return to G70 was particularly emotional as his wife passed when she was in her early 30s and had just given birth to their youngest the year prior. As the next holiday season approached, we were shocked and overwhelmed with gratitude when that young father reached out to us asking to sponsor a family or two of his own this time. Inspired by our kindness, Alex has since started his very own nonprofit named in his late wife's honor called Becca's Blessings, and he raises funds with his annual golf scramble. We now coordinate every year to help as many families as we possibly can, and his nonprofit is able to assist families all throughout the year. From the moment I cared for my first oncology patient, I knew I had found my calling. But being able to be a part of something and inspire others in a way that is able to reach far greater than the patients I've cared for throughout my career is the reason I continue to show up every single day. Trusting that what I do makes a difference and continuing to cultivate a culture of hope within a community that is forever linked together by an unimaginable bond that no one asks to share.
ONS member Susie Maloney is Senior Director of the Medical Affairs Company and Principal of Oncology Nursing Advisors, LLC, in Dayton, Ohio. Listen as she takes us on a trip to discover the variety of nurses in far-off destinations in her story called It's a Big World Out There.
So I was walking the Great Wall of China. Okay, how cool is it that I get to start a story that way? I have been blessed with many international teaching experiences, and I'd love to share a few snippets with you today. When we finished hiking the Great Wall of China in Beijing, we stopped to use the restroom before heading back to town. I was the last to load up, so I jogged the last few yards to the van. Next thing I know, there was a loud smack and a piercing pain above my eye. I had run straight into the van door that was still open in the back. Immediately, blood was pouring down my face. Luckily, I had a van full of nurses who were ready to help. They poured bottled water to clean the wound and applied pressure. They determined that I wouldn't need stitches and bought me a can of cold beer to attempt to stop the swelling since there was no ice to be found. The beer itself proved to be more helpful for me, actually. What an experience that was. One thing I've learned when teaching in countries with different cultures is that it's important to respect the people and be educated on what their beliefs happen to be. It is not our job to teach them our Western ways. This can be a challenge, however, particularly when some beliefs or practices are not evidence-based. For example, I was working with a group of nurses from 8 different Middle Eastern countries who are all Muslim. One of the Arab practices that is somewhat common in their culture is burning or cautery. A practitioner or healer will take an instrument and burn the skin of a patient with cancer repeatedly in order to release toxins and prevent the cancer from spreading. This is often done on pediatric cancer patients who are immunosuppressed. I asked them if there was any evidence to suggest that this therapy is effective. There was none. So instead of instructing them to stop this therapy that can be harmful to patients, I asked them if they would be comfortable explaining to families why this practice can be harmful and should be avoided, especially in patients who are immunocompromised. They agreed. Often, religious beliefs can be a barrier, especially in regard to palliative care. Some of the terminology that we use in patients who are at the end of their lives is not culturally acceptable. For example, DNR is not commonly accepted in the Islam religion, and in many hospitals in the Middle East, DNR orders are illegal. The Islamic culture has valued and respected the life of patients and respects every second of their lives. As my colleagues and I were teaching in Oman, we offered a different approach. What if instead of DNR, it was called AND, or allowing a natural death? This was more acceptable and became something that is now taught in Arab countries. Much of my work throughout Asia and the Middle East has been with mid to high income countries such as Oman, the UAE, Japan, and China. Then I went to Africa. My first experience was with one of the poorest countries in the world, Ethiopia. Up until this point, very little education took place in the country about oncology because most of the population died from communicable diseases before they were old enough to get cancer. With the availability of vaccines, people are living longer and therefore they're getting cancer. The barriers to care were endless. If a family was wealthy enough to afford chemotherapy, They needed to purchase it and then bring it to the hospital to be infused. The nurses couldn't even verify what exactly was in the bag since it was not prepared at that hospital. On the inpatient unit, there was one sink to wash your hands for the entire floor. Having individual sinks in rooms is a luxury that they cannot afford. When working in Zanzibar, Tanzania, the nurses shared that often the hospital does not have enough food to feed the patients. If family members are not able to bring in food for their loved one, then the patient may not eat that day. When working in impoverished countries, it is important to consider what is within their achievable means. We would not teach about the latest therapies that are used in the US if there's no chance of patients having access to such therapies or medications. For example, when I taught in the West Bank in Israel, there was only one radiation therapy machine for the entire country. Women with breast cancer almost always had to opt for mastectomy versus a lumpectomy because of this restriction. The practice of nursing is considerably different in various parts of the world. Several years ago, a colleague and I were invited to speak in St. Petersburg, Russia. Each year, the country hosts an international oncology conference, similar to what ASCO is in the US. They decided to offer a nursing breakout, which they had never done before. The topic they asked us to cover was leadership. During our preparation for the course, we asked many questions to the hosts around the role of nurses, such as how much autonomy and collaboration takes place. We learned that nurses stand when an oncologist enters the room. How open to change are you? It's interesting to work with various cultures and determine what change they might be willing and open to doing, and then understanding what changes they might not be open to doing. So let's go back to China for a moment. Remember my Great Wall experience? Since I hadn't had a tetanus shot in over 10 years, I got to experience a Chinese emergency room. I went in with an interpreter, stood in line, and requested a vial of tetanus. A pharmacist gave me one, and I went to the cashier and paid for it. The next challenge was finding someone to give me the shot. We wandered around the ER, flagged down a nurse. She ushered me into a small room and gave me the shot. Oh, and my eye was so black and blue that the students I were teaching that week called me Panda. I must say, I've enjoyed some interesting experiences. Thank you for listening.
Our last story today is from ONS member Brenda Sandoval Tawakelevu, a nursing professional development practitioner at the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake City, Utah. Like many nurses, she experienced a period of burnout that left her doubting her career choice. In The Road Less Traveled, Brenda tells us what renewed her passion and purpose as an oncology nurse.
Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all of the difference. Oncology nursing isn't for everyone, and in many senses, it well could be considered the road less traveled, less chosen. Many have said it would be too hard to work in oncology, too sad. And to others, they say there isn't the adrenaline of the ER or the complexity of the ICU, and the list goes on. But as I look back over the last 25 years of nursing primarily in the oncology realm, I feel so much gratitude for my time spent at the bedside of patients and family members going through one of their toughest mortal challenges. The times that I have held the feeble hand as they take their last breath, or the excitement of hearing the bell ring as some patients completed their treatment and went on to the next chapter in life. Although I've had many fond memories of patients and families that I have loved and cared for, I wouldn't be truthful if I didn't tell you I've also had many doubts about oncology nursing during some of the very rough seasons of life that we all experience. I've been at the crossroads, and I have seen the two roads that the poet Robert Frost has so beautifully written about. This hasn't occurred just once, but many times through the years as I've experienced the highs and also the lows of this road less traveled of oncology nursing. At the beginning of my career, I worked at a pediatric hospital on the oncology floor. I connected intimately with my patients and families there. I laughed with them. I skipped down the halls with them. I carried out so many wagon rides and also sat in many rocking chairs with a child on my shoulder in the middle of the night. I looked forward to their return visits, and I so admired their resilient spirits. But even with it all and all of the good that did abound, the hard was still there. And eventually I fell prey to the pains of loss, of disappointment, of relapses, central line infections, body disturbance from surgery, and yes, our good old friend grief. As I approached the two paths, I did decide to leave oncology, and I left oncology for a short 18 months. Surprisingly, I found myself longing to be back doing what I had grown to love so much. I decided once again to set foot on that path, that one less traveled. Many years later, I found myself working inpatient on a medical oncology floor in a very large medical center in Houston, Texas. As much as I tried, as much as I showed up day after day, something was different. Something had changed. I found myself moving from crisis to crisis and not taking the time that I needed to feel, to heal, and to take care of myself, or even to live out my purpose. Pretty soon, I began to see those two roads again, the crossroads, and I wondered what I needed and what I would choose. But then something miraculous occurred. I ran into the CNO of the hospital. She looked at me and must have seen the look in my eye or felt the burden I was carrying. And she stopped and she asked me, "How are you today?" I felt such a huge frog in my throat and the pressure of tears welling up in my eyes. And I said, just living the dream. I wasn't anyone special. I wasn't even from Texas. I hadn't worked there long, but she stopped. She felt something. She asked and she listened. And then I just blurted out, "I'm not happy and I just can't keep doing this. I can't keep losing my patients. I can't keep working for 12-hour shifts. I just can't do this." And she asked me what had kept me going for so many years. And after a breath, I told her it was the beautiful patients that I had taken care of, my amazing coworkers, and the challenges and complexity in the ever-changing world of oncology. But let's take a time out for a minute. I also want to acknowledge that not all of my patients gracefully walked their cancer journey. Not all of my coworkers were amazing. And don't get me wrong, it surely hasn't been a bed of roses working with patients dealing with anger and grief and a myriad of other addictions, problems, comorbidities, and the list goes on. But through it all, they always seem to teach me something. Yes, they always taught me something. But back to the conversation with the CNO, I told her I'm not even sure anymore if even nursing is the career for me. I feel like a robot and that I'm pretty much just checking off automated tasks from my task list every shift. She listened and asked me, "When was the last time that you sat at the bedside of one of your patients and listened to them?" I literally laughed out loud and scoffed in her face at such a comment. And to be honest with you, I wondered when was the last time that she had worked on an inpatient oncology unit. And I told her, well, that was impossible. And there is no way with our staffing issues and the complexity of our patients that there would ever be time for such a moment to sit at the bedside. Honestly, the thought did cross my mind, like I say, and really wondered if this lady really knew what she was talking about. But she validated my feelings, and then she kindly extended an invitation for me to find one patient a shift and sit out of all things for at least a minute at the bedside and ask them something about themselves, their family, their journey. In other words, connect with them. After some thought, I decided, I would take her advice. And you know what? My life began to change for the better. I really had lost my connection with the most important part of why I was an oncology nurse. And that was truly the patients. Somehow through the hard things I witnessed day in and day out, my mindset had turned inward. I had felt so isolated, so trapped, and I was blinded and forgot what used to fill my bucket. But you know what? It really was them. It was that connection. It was that shared humanity, that compassion, and the challenge that they brought into my life. Within days, I met an unforgettable patient who I connected with. I had the honor to be there for her all through her new diagnosis of ovarian cancer, treatment, relapse, and yes, eventually death. As she faced the news of relapse, we cried together. I sat by her bedside and I asked her about her journey of cancer. And she said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, "If cancer does nothing else for me, then show me my blessings. It will have done enough." She passed away a few months later, and I will never forget the day when I got the call at the hospital from her daughter. It was a bittersweet moment for me as I knew she was at peace. But not only that, I knew that she knew and counted every one of her blessings on her mortal journey. Then the daughter said, Brenda, you were so special to her. You helped alleviate her suffering and helped her heal some things in her life that she really needed to heal from. The daughter then proceeded to tell me that her mom, who we will call Beth, asked for me to sing at her funeral. Now, one thing that you may or may not know about me is that I'm not a singer, and especially a solo singer. But boy, did I sing my heart out at her funeral. I sang 2 songs by myself in the most beautiful Methodist church in the northern part of Houston, Texas. These experiences helped propel me forward onto my own healing path as I remembered her powerful words and her example, her endurance that penetrated my heart. Her courage to heal from her wounds of life will never be forgotten. Life continued forward, and within a few months of time of connecting with others and working on my own path of healing, I was given new opportunities. I was given the opportunity to be the chairman of the Clinical Practice Council on my unit, then the clinical nurse coordinator, and then the clinical educator. All roles I led with new insight, refreshed with new vision. By following the advice of the wise CNO, I was able to find my purpose, once again connect with patients and families, and continue forward on this path. Now 8 years have passed, and I keep going day by day in the wonderful field of oncology. The flames of passion continue to grow, and that passion has been shared with hundreds of students and nurses that have been in my path over the years. I invite each one of you to choose to connect, choose to find your own balance in the field of oncology nursing, choose to heal your own wounds life has left upon you, and most of all, continue to choose oncology nursing. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all of the difference.
The practice of storytelling, like what our 4 nurses shared today, is an essential act of well-being. By communicating a problem, providing context, and presenting a solution, a storyteller promotes both professional and personal learning. Storytelling creates a social connection that fosters a sense of community and mutual support for both the storyteller and the listener.
Nurses have endless opportunities to use storytelling in professional development and clinical practice, from staff and chapter meetings, newsletters, huddles, and shift handoffs to patient and nursing education, nursing research, and more. Look for ways to weave your stories throughout your professional and personal day-to-day interactions. You can also connect to the broader ONS network, perhaps even internationally like Susie did, by sharing your storytelling through the options we've linked in the episode summary. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. Tell us about your favorite part in this episode by leaving a review wherever you download your podcast. For more resources and information about oncology nursing, visit us at ons.org or voice.ons.org. The ideas and opinions shared in this episode represent those of the guest and not necessarily ONS.